And we're back. So today, or well, tonight I should say, I'm going to try and dress up and cut out some of these really bad rust panels. We'll have a look. What I'm going to do is I got my trusty wire wheel here and my work light. I'm going to quickly try and strip some of this scabby parent material and paint and rust and fleck and crap off, just so we can give us a little bit of an idea as to what we're working with underneath some of this paint and filler and God knows what else has been crammed in there, and then maybe we'll look at starting to cut them out. Alright, let's get to it. So I quickly descaled this little bit here. What I might do next is maybe just go and cut along these weld lines. I don't know whether you guys can see them very well. God, that's bright. I'll just cut along these weld lines and see if I can get this little patch peeled off. I can see it's just overlaid the existing material. I'll get onto that one. I tried grinding this one a little bit back, but it is in a pretty tight spot. So I'll try and cut that one out a little bit as well. I don't know whether you guys can make that out, but there's the internal skin there in the plenum, and what we're probably going to have to do is patch that first, just so the thing seals, because that's where your water runs through. That's where our hole is. So I'm going to have to somehow patch that from this side and then redress that other panel onto it. Alright, so we've peeled this first section back. One of the things I was trying to be cautious of was just cutting too deep into the panel through these welds, obviously because this is connecting into your A-pillar and or your structural section through here. I don't want to be cutting too much of the parent material out, because it might affect the structural integrity if I don't get a patch in here soon, if I start loading weight into the engine bay and so forth. This is pretty damn ugly looking, really. Like, we can see some previous patchwork, if you can call it that. It's more like bloody weld filler. They've tried to fill this. There looks like there's an existing patch already on there that someone previously has done, and rather than cut that one out and replace it, instead they've just welded another patch over it. So I'll get the rest of this piece out, and maybe we'll get a closer look at this one. This is a pretty bloody ugly botch job, guys. As you can see from that bit there, that's the patch panel. That's bare metal on the backing surface. You can see the grinder marks and everything's still in it, so you know, there's no way in hell that would have lasted much longer in the car. That would have completely rusted out. I'm glad we got onto this early. This is going to require a little bit more work, I think. Oh man, it just does not look nice. Alright, ain't nothing to it but to do it, I guess. Sorry guys, I haven't been filming much. I kind of need both hands to do a little bit. As you can see here, for the most part, this bit of panel here, this secondary patch or inner skin, I didn't really even need to cut much of it out. For the most part, I was able to pry it out with my pry bar. I mean, as we can see, it's penetrating into the dash and into the behind the firewall. There's a bit of a really badly burnt bit of the loom there, possibly going up to the dimmer switch, or the possibly going up to the roof light somewhere up there, but I don't think that's going to work too well anymore. I guess one of the main things I was a little bit concerned about with this section here in particular was whether or not there was any rust sections coming through into the plenum on the firewall side. So I don't know whether you guys can see in through there. There's a small hole, and that's going straight into the above your right foot, essentially. So I think what I might do, at least for now, is if I can continue cutting this section out, perhaps I'll cut across this flat area here, maybe down through this hole a little bit, just so I can grant access to that. The hole itself's maybe no bigger than a 20-cent piece, or no bigger than that hole there, but of course we're going to have to remove a little bit of the parent material so we can get something decent welded in. I mean, as you can tell, it's quite a common thing with these old cars. There's no real sealant or paint or protective coatings in between the panels. So even like, say, this bit here, that's an original piece of material. You can see the backside of that has no protective paint on it whatsoever. So that's how these cars, that's how they rust and that's how they degrade like this, particularly in areas such as the plenum and your wheel arches and so forth that are constantly getting battered by the environments, the weather. You know, they have a lot of capture points in the panels. Obviously they aren't sealed, so they retain moisture, they capture moisture, and that's how they rust. I guess with the patchwork that I'm going to do, I'm going to have to try and seal it up as best as possible. Maybe even use a weld-through primer, just to ensure that I eliminate as much surface that can rust again in the future. Yep. Plenum's always fun to deal with. I mean, this part isn't too bad, but you know, until we cut it out, we really don't know the extent of it. I mean, it's going to be a pain getting up into that section there. What I might just do is just cut out that entire little right angle lip and just refabricate a whole new corner. Don't know whether any of this actually, I don't know what that head's going to, that bolt head. I doubt any of this is unboltable, but you know, I might be actually. I might be able to just unbolt this little panel here. That'll make things a lot easier. I'll give that a crack and see how I go. Alright. There we have it, guys. Turns out that little bit there was just a bolt-on section. That's going to make my life a hell of a lot easier, especially with accessibility to that little area. Yeah, a bit of familiarity with these cars comes in handy. Look at that. That's a good little section. So that was just held on with 4 or 5 little metal screws. I don't really like using these too much for a few reasons. One is they're essentially just a threaded screw, which means they rely on a mechanical friction between the parent and the panel materials. And that's bad because it essentially will strip away any protective coating that you might have in your bolt holes. And, you know, that's going to be prone to rust and everything else. Another reason why I don't really like these is they're easy to over-tighten and damage your screw point. So I think what I might do is eventually just go through and replace every single one of these I can find, at least every single one that is accessible to a nut and bolt, and replace them. These would be primarily used originally with the car because they're cheap. Like, I think that'd purely be it, cheap and reduced in manufacturing and assembly time. So we'll go through and try and get rid of all this kind of junk from the car. Well, some pretty gnarly shit. Look at that. Straight into the dash. Yeah, well, as you can see, there's the bracket for your door hinge there, so that's what was more or less holding the door up, so we'll patch and replace that up. A lot of this material looks quite thick, so it's going to be easy to weld, which is beneficial. Maybe I'll get some slightly thicker replacement panel for that, just to really strengthen it up. Maybe I'll get 2mm, 3mm, and just form a little panel. Try and copy that other side as best as possible. I mean, thankfully it's in an area which can't really be seen unless you take the fender off or really look down the gap in the door when it's open. So I mean, it's gonna look botchy when I repair it. I mean, I'm no panel beater by all means, but I'll do my best, and if it turns out like absolute garbage, maybe I'll look into some other options. So, alright, well, we'll see how we go from here.
Bye.